Hey, we had some audio problems. Okay, good afternoon and welcome to the Science Society's lecture by Dr. Linda McIntosh, exploring the textile traditions of Alor Regency, Indonesia. The Alor Regency is an island located in the remote eastern part of Indonesia, north of West Timor. It is not a well-known place and very little has been written or studied about the Alor Regency and its traditions. Alor is an agrarian society, and it's growing a variety of crops such as rice, vanilla, and cotton. Its textiles are woven on the coastal areas, and they're traded with the non-weaving people of the interior of the island, as well as with neighboring islands. These textiles are woven on narrow backstrap looms. In addition to trade, the textiles are used in rituals, clothing, and gift exchange. Our speaker today, Dr. Linda McIntosh, is an expert on Southeast Asian textiles with the emphasis on Laos and Thailand. She received her master's degree from the University of Wisconsin in the United States and a PhD from Simon Fraser University in Canada. She is a curator of Southeast Asian textiles and has numerous books to her credit. Dr. McIntosh traveled to Indonesia numerous times over the years, and her latest research produced the book entitled Textiles of Alor, that was published in 2020, co-authored by Luyanti Perry, and on which this lecture is based. The talk, the entire talk with the question and answers will last about 45 to 60 minutes. Please leave your questions at the Q&A box. Now, let us welcome Dr. Linda McIntosh.
Hello, thank you very much, Kun Ruth, for the nice introduction. And also I would like to thank the Science Society for giving me the opportunity to present this topic today. And I would like to thank all of you from across the world for joining this talk. Oops, I'm trying to, sorry, just sharing. As you are well aware, the title of my presentation today is Exploring the Textile Traditions of Alor Regency, Indonesia. So this is an introduction to the textile traditions of Alor. It's based on an ebook that I co-wrote with Mrs. Yulianti A. Penny. I would not have been able to have done this talk or completed this talk without her collaboration. Mrs. Penny, also known as Ibu Yanti Alalang, works at the Museum 1000 Moko in the capital city of Alor Regency, Kalabahi. She is on a mission to document and preserve the textile traditions of Alor, as well as to spread awareness of their diverse cultural heritage. She received funds from the central government, Jakarta, to publish a book, and so she enlisted me to help her write it. So we co-authored the book entitled Textiles of Alor, which is an introduction, as I said, to the Textiles of Alor Regency, but focusing on Alor Island and neighboring islands such as Buaya and Ternate. Future volumes will cover other islands such as Pantar, as well as textiles of specific ethnic groups. We have published one article in Textiles Asia Journal on the ikats of Umapura village on Ternate Island. We have a forthcoming article in the Archipel Journal, as well as some articles in the forthcoming Bloomsbury Encyclopedia of World Textiles. As Kun Ruth mentioned, Alor Regency is located due north of West Timor. So if we look at the black and white map, in this small box, we have the map of Indonesia, and the gray box is of Nusa Tenggara Timor, or the kind of the eastern islands. And here we have West Timor, and we look due north, we find Alor Regency. So the colored map on the right was produced by Australian National University, and we can see the main islands are Alor itself, Pantor Island. Smaller inhabited islands include Maricha, Buoya, Ternate, and Ternate is not Ternate of the Spice Islands or the Maluku Islands. This small island was named after this more famous island in Maluku. Other smaller inhabited islands include Pura and Tarawan, as well as Kange. And another beautiful map from Australian National University designates the sub-districts of Alor. So we'll be visiting virtually some of the coastal areas of Alor Island proper, as well as Buoya and Ternate in this talk. We don't have enough time to cover Pantar and other islands. So besides textile traditions, other topics concerning Alor, a regency, as well also Alor archipelago in the same area. There's very little written in history, anthropology, and linguistics. However, that's changed, particularly in the last 20 years. Numerous studies have been conducted in linguistics, and some historians have combed archival records such as the Dutch East Indies Company or the VOC, as well as Portuguese records to find information about the different settlements in these islands over the last 500 years. Some anthropologists did some documentation in the 20th century. One particularly interesting anthropologist is an American woman, Cora Du Bois, who studied the Bui ethnic group. However, this ethnic group does not weave. And so we don't have any information about textile production from her studies. So these illustrations are from a book published in the 19th century. And the illustrations are based on an account of a French couple who made a around the world voyage in the 1820s. So they visited the south coast of Alor. We're not sure exactly where and which ethnic group they met, but we have an idea of some of the attire of this particular ethnic group. So we can compare with later photos. So some just basic background. Alor Regency is part of Nusa Tenggara Timor, as I mentioned earlier. Its population is just over 200,000 people. And within this 200,000 plus population, over 24 languages and dialects are spoken. And what's distinct and unique, particularly, is that the majority of these languages are non-Austronesian. So they belong to the Alor Pantar branch of the Trans-New Guinea ethno-linguistic family. The sole Austronesian language, such as Indonesian is an Austronesian language, is Alarung, also known as Alorese. This is considered an indigenous language. Indonesian became more widespread in the archipelago or the Regency from the 1970s. And so since this is an island culture, fishing is a primary occupation, it's really obvious, as well as maritime trade. We also have agriculture in the inland areas. Weaving is the responsibility of women, regardless of ethnicity. However, weaving only occurs in coastal areas. There is no weaving inland, no textile production inland. So some of these non-weaving cultures have prohibitions against weaving. However, they are able to grow cotton. So these groups would sometimes exchange cotton for other products, including woven textiles from coastal groups. So reciprocal relationships grew between the coastal settlements and the inland groups. The inland groups provided foodstuffs because the coastal areas had little arable land for growing food, much as cotton and other items, such as areca nut. So the inland groups provided food and candle nut as well as areca nut and other products such as vanilla and spices, including cardamom and cloves. So here we have some photos from inland Alor. So you have, kind of an idea of what, the area we're talking about. And here you have wet rice cultivation, as well as the cultivation of corn and cassava. And so here's some traditional architecture of the Abui ethnic group. So this is the ethnic group that Cora DuBois, the American anthropologist, studied in the early 20th century. This group is a non-weaving culture, so they would trade with the coastal groups for textiles, which they still wear for traditional occasions as well as when tourists come to visit. So on the left and center is a domestic home. And the building in the photo on the right is a ritual or clan house that was stores sacred heirlooms of a lineage. So the Alarung or Alaris is a coastal ethnic group, and so they're a weaving culture. So we focus so far on the Alarung in Northwest Alor district. So they're found along the southwest coast of the Bird's Head Peninsula of Alor Island, in Buaya, Ternate, as well as parts of Pantor Island. So we see fishing is a primary occupation, as well as trade. So you have boats traveling between the various islands within the archipelago or Regency, as well as into other islands in the region. And weaving is a secondary, if not primary, occupation of women, particularly on the smaller islands of Buaya and Ternate. So these are the main groups that weave in Alor Regency. I just mentioned the Alarung. So they're the sole Austronesian group, language-speaking group in the Alor Regency. Yeah, and the rest of the groups belong to the Alor Pontar language branch of the Trans-New Guinea ethno-linguistic family. So you have the Adang also in Northwest Alor. They primarily live in the inland areas, so in areas where people would not weave. However, you do have Adang settlements along the coast, intermingled with the Alarung. So some Adang women weave warpicot decorated textiles. The Reta are found on the islands of Pura and Ternate. And particularly on Ternate Island, they weave warpicot textiles as well. The other 4 groups mentioned here, the Gui and Klon, live in Southwest Alor, the Kiramang of South Alor, as well as the Taruamang of East Alor. These groups do not use warp ikat, but use other weaving techniques, which I will describe soon. So why is not much known about the handwoven textiles of Alor in Indonesian, English, or another language? Well, the textiles are relatively rare. As I said, they're only woven along the coast, where there's little agrarian land. And so there's not much for growing food or cotton. So weavers, would have to trade with inland groups for cotton, and also with neighboring islands for cotton. So one weaver related to Mrs. Penny, that she grew enough cotton per year, maybe for one textile, such as one sarong. Sometimes she would not have enough to complete one garment, so she would have to acquire cotton elsewhere. So Dr. Ruth Barnes is a renowned Indonesian textile expert or historian, as well as other anthropologists have described how these earthenware pots from Alor were sailed to Limbata, for example, and the price of the pot was the amount of raw cotton that could fit in it. Textiles were also scarce because the sacred textiles, the most valuable, the most intricate textiles, were stored, such as in bamboo tubes, and only taken out for specific rites, such as funerals. And also many textiles accompany this deceased into the grave. So textiles would be kept and stored and only appeared during a funeral, and then they would also be buried with the deceased. So now I'll talk about the textiles of each ethnic group that I just mentioned. I won't go over the textiles of the Adang or Reta, since the Adang textiles look similar to the Alarung, and just for the sake of time. Sorry. So the Alarung primarily use warp ikat to decorate cloth. Some weavers utilize complementary warp technique, but this can be for textiles primarily traded or for textiles they use on a daily basis. So I'll just focus on the Alarung textiles of Northwest Alor. So if we look at the map, kind of this boxed area around the coast. So in the map, the Alarung are called Alaris. I like to use Alarung because this is the term that the Alarung use themselves so that's the name for themselves. So the 5 main Alarung areas in Northwest Alor sub-district are Dulalong, Alor Kecil, Alor Besar, Ternate Island, and Buaya Island. Sadly, in Alor Besar proper, weaving or textile production has ceased, but you do have weaving in outlying villages still active. So if we see in the photos here that both men and women wear tubular skirts or sarong, tubular lower garments. And see, we have different styles of tubular skirts or garments, which are called tinapi in Alarung language. So you have, all generations, wearing this type of garment. And usually younger women wear this for special occasions, such as major festivals. And what Mrs. Penny and I would like to do is document the specific tinapi that have a ritual role, or particularly that which are identifying markers of suku or patrilineage membership. So a suku is a patrilineage, or where members of one group, recognize the same founding father. So more than one clan can compose a patrilineage or suku, because sometimes this gets a little confusing. And also in Alarung, this is called uma or house, rumah in Indonesian. So the number of suku that compose society in an Alarung settlement can vary. For example, in Alor Besar, which is considered the oldest and probably most sacred Alarung kingdom, has 3 suku, while the village of Umapura on Ternate Island has 8 suku. So each suku or patrilineage has a ritual or clan house. These are modern structures, but here maybe the eldest male of the lineage is supposed to reside in it, and people will come here for meetings or to settle any problem that relates to the lineage. And the one in the photo here, it's a little dark, but it's the ritual or clan house of the ruling patrilineage of Alor Besar. As I mentioned earlier, tinapi is a tubular garment of the Alarung. So it can be worn by both men and women. Men also wear it as a sarong, but also as a hip wrapper, so like the Japanese kain panjang. So it's wrapped around the hips, maybe over trousers. So there's a combination of colors or stripes, sometimes patterns, and the design format, the organization of the bands of warp ikat, along with the stripes that compose a particular tinapi. And so you have specific tinapi that identify patrilineages, and also you have clan neutral tinapi. However, it can become complicated, so you have to really get the information, the history of the textile itself from the wearer, from the owner. Because a person of one lineage can gift another person outside of this lineage, even a non-Alarung person, a tinapi. And so they can use the textile, but you cannot assume that they are a member of this suku if they are wearing the textile. So it's always important. Observation is important, but also interviewing is also extremely important when gathering documentation. So I won't go over all the Tanapi that represent Suku or patrilineages, but I want to mention this type is called Tanapi Patola, Fatola or Watola, depending on the Alarun dialect spoken. So it generally signifies membership in the ruling patrilineage or Umasuku. So Tanapi Patola, so we all know Patola is the plural of Patolu, or the double ikat decorated silks from India. So these are prestige items that were also preserved by the cultures of Alor. So a Tanapi Patola is always composed of 3 panels of fabric. The outer panels are identical, but the midsection is decorated with patterning inspired by Patola. And this one is called, on the example on the left, is Balalong Sambung, which is connecting banyan tree leaves. The image in the middle is a detail of the Tanapi on the right. And here we have rondelles, so the weaver's trying to be perhaps a bit more exact in replicating a pattern on the Patolu. And this one is distinct because it also includes silk thread, another imported item. And since thread was scarce, in Alor archipelago, there was no kind of taboo against using threads from elsewhere, including silk. And since silk was rare and it was also prestigious, and so incorporating silk into a Tanapi Patola increased its value in society. So we have different variations, the Tanapi Patola, Fatola, or Watola. Sometimes people will just call it Patola, Watola, or Fatola. You don't have to add Tanapi to the front to this particular type. You have variations in the styles of the patterning and the types of materials over time, because this is a type of Tanapi that is pretty, given to well-respected guests. For example, one was given to the wife of the governor of East Indonesia last year. Some examples have images that are reminiscent of dragons from Chinese ceramics. Chinese ceramics are another prestige item that were brought into the archipelago via trade. And then in Alor Kachil, there's even one Suku or patrilineage where the founding father is Chinese. So Chinese, traders settled in Alor Kachil, married a local woman, and they began a lineage. But also the traders brought prestige objects, so they were often, under the shelter of the ruler. So you can find the Naga, and also in Alor cultures, including Alarung and Adang, you have serpent mythical snakes or serpents called Ular Naga. Ular is snake. And these mythical serpents play roles in foundation stories of these people. So you have their image of the dragon is fitting. So you wonder, how come the weavers of the Alarung weavers know about Patola? And we wonder also too, because since there isn't a lot of information about Alor Regency, there is some which one historian has uncovered, but as Alor Regency and the maritime trade era is not well known. However, numerous Patolu have been found in the archipelago. These are just details of examples in private collections. There's one example in the collections of the Asian Civilizations Museum. The Museum 1000 Moko has 3 Patolu in its collection. And you've always find, several come out for sale every year. And so the Alor, the settlements of Alor were important enough to receive gifts of Patola from traders, although there isn't much written about this interaction. So here are just examples of other Tanapi. So these are decorated with warp ikat, and you have different color stripes. I won't give, you can look at the articles for the details of each type, but you can just see you have differences in colors in the organizations of the bands of warp ikat. So all these details compose a specific type of tanapi. So I'll move on down the south coast of Alor Island to the southwest corner. So Gui and Klon are related, and I'll just focus on the textiles of the Gui ethnic group. So their original settlement was located on the south coast of Alor in the southwest corner. The Gui were also active in trade. However, the Raja or ruler of the Gui relocated to Moru, which is located directly opposite of Kalabahi in the bay in the second quarter of the 20th century. So he could be closer to kind of administration during the Dutch colonial period. Because traveling inland in Alor Island, as well as Pantor, is quite difficult. The roads are not good, and also the terrain is very steep. So travel is not easy. And also traveling by water, it can be dangerous because the Umbai Strait between Alor Island and Timor is very swift. And so you still have news of boats overturning, and, every few years. So travel is not easy. And so this is one reason why the Gui Raja relocated. So you do find Gui weavers in this area in the bay opposite of Kalabahi. So textiles of the Gui ethnic group include the male garment called nawon, which is a 2-paneled cloth, which is used as a hip wrapper. It can be used as a shawl. A secondary garment, which may have been a primary garment previously, is the emel or loincloth. And the woman's main garment is a sarong or tubular skirt called kin. The main decorative techniques are complementary warp, weft twining, and discontinuous supplementary weft. So the Gui society is composed of 4 patrilineages or suku. And here, color also distinguishes textiles of one suku from another, because often many of the patterns can be used by all of the patrilineages, except for there in the past, there were a couple patterns that were the exclusive right of the ruling lineage or the suku layer. So this skirt or kin is an example of a clan neutral cloth, because the Gui would also trade or sell textiles to non-weaving groups located, inland of Alor, including the Bui, the Bui ethnic group. So if you look at this skirt, it's only composed of 3 panels, where women's garments that represent a patrilineage or suku consist of 4 panels. So this is an example of a kin or woman's tubular garment from the Suku Koilelang in the collection of George Breguet, a Swiss collector of Indonesian textiles and other arts. It's a beautiful old example, and you can hear you have the bold stripings. So you have orange, yellow, pink is some of the dominant colors of the stripes. And here the weavers applied discontinuous supplementary weft to form the patterning in the midsection, which is composed of 2 panels of cloth. And this technique also forms patterns in the bands that have a black background. And you also have complementary warp designs in yellow. A man's cloth is called nawon, and this example is from the Suku Kaletawas. And this nawon is also in George Breguet's collection. For men's textiles, you also have the addition of weft twining, because weft twining is a decorative technique, but also helps to secure the weft into the warp, and it will not unravel. Well, and this is quite interesting too, because you also have slit woven fringe as well, which is very rare, and I'll talk about at the very end. And also and you also have continuous supplementary weft. This example, and this is a younger example of a man's cloth or nawon from this Suku Malay Kapat. And here you have the details, and the main colors are red, orange, and white. So you have similar patternings representing all four lineages, but here you have distinctions in the coloration. Okay, as we continue east along the south coast, we reach the historic kingdom of Batu Lolong. So Batu Lolong begins at the south coast and goes inland to the center part of the island. And the most populous group of Batu Lolong kingdom is the Kiramang. So the Kiramang also speak Kiramang language. So you have Kiramang living inland as well along the coast. Kiramang women inland do not weave. However, Kiramang women living on the coast and did learn to weave. So one example is the current Ratu or queen. She is from the inland area, so growing up, she did not know how to weave. So when she married the Ratu then, who was the crown prince, her mother-in-law, the Ratu then, taught the daughter-in-law how to weave. So now she weaves. So a woman's tubular garments or skirts are called kin, while the man's cloth, which is also a two-paneled textile, worn as a hip wrapper or shawl, is called non. The techniques forming the patterning on these textiles are complementary warp and weft twining. Kiramang recognizes three suku or patrilineages. And so here on this, and for the textiles of the suku of the Kiramang, is generally patterns that identify textiles of a particular suku. So on this example of the suku adik, you have the S-shaped pattern in the, in white, where they look like, lizards. So you have appendages coming off the body. And the Ratu stated a lot of these designs are inspired by wood carvings decorating the clan houses. And the detail on the right is of a known or man's cloth in the collection at the Museum 1000 Moko. So it's a clan neutral cloth, which is designated by the patterning decorating the fabric. This is another example of a clan neutral known. But is beautiful with the hand spun cotton that's dyed with natural dyes. And here's another example of a clan neutral known. Yeah, so it's, in a way, it's difficult to find old examples of these textiles, as I said, for the reasons earlier. And also in trying to reach these areas is quite challenging because of the road conditions as well as in the dangers of the sea. So we'll move on to the East Alor district. So the East Alor district, you have the Worsing language speaking Taruomang. The Taruomang first founded their kingdom on the south coast of East Alor. So if you look on the map, the blue section, and there were two ruling lineages, and the youngest lineage that Raja Yusuf Makinimau belongs to, relocated to Kelowna, which is on the far east coast of Alor Island. And this is where he resides, and his palace is found, or Koton. And so this part of Alor is directly over Dili of Timor-Leste. And so this ruling family has relations with the ruling family of Dili. But you also find pockets of Worsing on the north coast of East Alor as well. So we haven't checked to see if weaving occurs in these pockets on the north coast, but primarily on the east coast in Maritime and Kelowna. And so the textiles of the Taruomang, there's more extant examples of their textiles available. And also it's very interesting because the number of techniques that are used to decorate their textiles. And as possible, the other groups use some of these, if not all, in the past, but we can't fine and extent textiles or any living memories of these other techniques. But we have complementary warp, supplementary warp, discontinuous supplementary weft, continuous supplementary weft, weft twining. Not only do you have simple weft twining, you have complex or supplementary weft twining that also makes figured patterns. There's slit tapestry as well as split weaving for tassels. So here in this image of a painting that's in the church in Kelowna, you have 7 children honoring Jesus Christ. So the 7 children represent the 7 suku of the Taruamang, and they're wearing textiles that identify these suku. And also Jesus Christ himself is wearing textiles, Taruamang textiles. Unfortunately, when I was in East Alor, I was able to attend a wedding and to be able to see numerous textiles, particularly textiles representing the 7 suku being worn. So here we have the groom being led by his mother and other female relatives to the bride's house. He's wearing a man's textile, which is called Kang Limi Kwing. And the women's sarong or tubular garment is Kang May Gaywing. Weaving is still active in Kelowna as well as Maritime. Maritime is just south of Kelowna and was made a capital of this area during the Dutch colonial period. But the Raja's sisters, the princesses, are in their 70s, but they actively weave. Here they primarily use store-bought thread. It's just easier. There's no prestige in using hand spun cotton or natural dyes. The factory spun or the market threads are finer and much easier to use. So here, that's why the textiles we see are made from these materials today. But this example is of an older style, composed of hand-spun cotton dyed with natural dyes, particularly indigo and madder, or morinda, sorry. Yeah, so here we have the Kang May Gaywang, or a woman's tubular skirt. So Kang means cloth. And so there's specific textiles or garments that signify membership in a suku or patrilineage. And also color is an identifying marker of these identity markers. So often or always you will have gebetir, which means waste in worsting language, but referring to the edges or selvages of a weaving is always part of the name of a cloth. So you say, for example, if you have a woman's garment, you have a Kang May Gaywang gebetir merik. So for a garment that has orange and yellow stripes, or a Kang May Gaywang gebetir kitty has pink and purple stripes. And this is kind of going out of the box for a moment. Not only do you have you don't have color really designating this garment, but you have a technique. So for the Suku Alor, which is a Kapitan or warrior lineage, their textiles have supplementary warp patterning, which they call Pupu Miyoko. And so here we see it in these white rows, flanking the black band that has discontinuous supplementary weft. And this pattern is called the Bunga Raja, or the royal motif. And so a man's cloth is Kang. Oops, sorry. I only have 5 minutes, sorry. So the man's cloth is Kang, and so a Kang Limi Gaywang. And here we just have one panel of a man's cloth. So you just see the stripes. So the Kang Limi Gaywang Gimiti Merrick has these orange and red stripes. And I just wanted to show you the end of a man's textiles, that you have the slit tapestry weave. I have to go quickly, sorry. And so So here is a man's cloth, however, the fringe has been cut, and this indicates it was used as a coffin cover previously. And this is a clan neutral example, so it can be used by anyone and also traded inland to other ethnic groups. But the main patterning in white and black is supplementary warp. I really want to get to these before the end. So this is a detail of a loincloth or kubel bias. And this example, this beautiful example, is in the collection of the Museum 1000 Moko. Bias refers to just simple twisted warp fringe, but here we see the different techniques used to form the patterning. So it's quite delicate. And here I just wanted to point out the patterning. You have a hourglass shape, you have maybe a frog or human-like figure. Some people think this is the moko or kettle or hourglass shaped kettle drum. However, this is a mortar and pestle. All the ritual or clan houses have these mortar and pestles that they use for grinding corn and rice, particularly for the harvest. So after the harvest, new rice and new corn are presented to the ancestors, to the deities, before the populace is allowed to eat the new crop. And I wanted to show the end of this loincloth. It's called Kubul Kirkir Bakar. And Kirkir Bakar refers to the split woven fringe. And also the weaver has added discontinuous supplementary weft patterning to each little tiny fringe, which I think is amazing. And here's another example of this type of textile. So loincloths can be several meters long to half a meter long. It just depends on the wealth of the owner or the person who will wear the textile, because sometimes it can just be a cover in front of their groin rather than a long textile that's wrapped in between the legs and around the waist that we normally think of as a loincloth. So thank you very much for your attention. I mean, this is just a brief introduction to the textiles of Alor Regency. We just started researching a few years ago, and we still have a lot of research to carry out, but we want to promote and spread awareness of these textile traditions, because some are at risk of disappearing, and many of the complex weaving techniques have already disappeared, as well as the warp ikat patterns that are currently being made are not very intricate. So we hope that we can encourage even the people of Alor to take more interest in their heritage, which many they do, but to learn more about it, and hopefully even the weavers will be encouraged to return to making the more intricate textiles. Okay, thank you very much, and I open the floor to questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. McIntosh, for introducing these beautiful textiles of the Alor Regency to us. It is amazing that a population of 200,000 has so many different groups that produce different textiles of vibrant colors and a variety of techniques. We must truly compliment Dr. McIntosh for documenting these little known textiles, a most valuable task, and for sharing these with us. And now we will take some questions. Okay, they have a question of asking Dr. McIntosh, how long did you spend there at the Alor Regency?
Okay, so yes, as I said, this is just early. This is early preliminary research. So I spent several trips there since 2018, several weeks at a time. So it's still short, and that's why collaborating with Mrs. Yulalanti Penny is important, because I couldn't do this by myself.
By the way, how do you go there?
By plane, yes, by plane, yes. But you can go Bali to Kupang. You can arrive in Kupang, and then Kupang you can take a 1-hour flight to Alor. Yeah.
Oh, it's amazing. Okay, another question is, how long would it take to weave one sarong?
Okay, well, I mean, this is always a little tricky because it depends, weavers, they're not weaving full time, 8 hours a day. So they have other, they have their familial activity responsibilities to carry out. But some of the weavers in Ternate Island, where it's become a primary occupation for some, they can, it can take, 2 to 3 weeks, maybe 1 month to finish a garment where they're spending time, full time weaving. But however, this is when the work ikat patterning is not very detailed. It's simple and it's not too many colors, so you don't have you're not repeating dyeing process over and over and over. So you have less time spent on the ikat, because weaving doesn't take long. The process is the dyeing as well as is binding, creating the warp ikat pattern.
I actually have a question by watching it. I saw women dressed in Muslim attire, and then of course you had the picture of Jesus. So what is the population there basically? Are they mostly Muslim or also Christians?
They're mainly Christian, but you have Muslim, like the Alarung or Muslim, as well as the Goi ethnic group. I think the Alarung population is around 25, 30,000. I'm not sure about the Gui ethnic group, their population numbers, but there's been a lot of studies, anthropological studies on Alor, particularly because you have these great religion, these larger religions, and also you have indigenous beliefs, and also the traditional society. You have the suku, so there's a lot of goodwill between people of different religions. If one village is building a mosque, the family members, if they're not Muslim, they're Christian, they will come and help. I mean, and also if there's a festival, regardless of religion, you come because your suku, if your suku is required to be there, you join regardless of religion. So also when you have with the Alarung, you also have different identities. You have the Muslim identity. And so you will see people wearing what is considered, I guess, Muslim attire, as well as they will wear traditional handwoven textiles to represent, membership identity as part of an Alarung suku.
Okay, we have a question here from Paul Sochakevsky, and he said, "Thank you, Linda. In one of your earlier slides, you mentioned some sukus having prohibitions against weaving. Could you expand on that, please?"
Okay, so not sukus, but it's ethnic groups, because in the inland areas, there's in a way prohibitions against weaving. People do not weave, and it's only when you go to the coastal areas where it's allowed. So you can have members of one ethnic group. If they're from the inland area, they don't weave. They live inland, they don't weave. But but if a woman moves to the coast and settles there, she's is expected to learn how to weave. For example, is the queen or Ratu of Batu Lolong. She was from an inland area, so she didn't grow up knowing how to weave. But when she married then the crown prince, who was from the coast, her mother-in-law, who was then the Ratu, taught her how to weave, because now she was living on the coast, married to a coastal man, and so was expected to produce textiles. So it's not suku or patrilineage, but it's location, and also it can be also ethnicity. So you have like the Bui, and they reside in the central area, but they do not weave. So yeah.
Okay, we have here several questions by Herbert Kennedy, and he says, "Do inland people wear these textiles like coastal people? And if yes, do they commission coastal people to weave their patrilineal patterns? Would a commoner have several woven outfits?"
Okay, yeah. So it depends on the era. In the past, when you had I guess before the time where you had manufactured thread, you can say from before the 1970s or a little bit earlier, when you had to rely on hand spun cotton. So as I said, these textiles are rare, so they're expensive. So, maybe one woman could just produce one cloth per year with cotton she produced herself. And then she had to acquire cotton. So they said, like, for the Abui, Cora DuBois, the American anthropologist, she wrote, okay, most people wore bark cloth. They could make bark cloth. And children wore bark cloth maybe till they were teenagers, or maybe just very simple loincloths, things, catch sexes, covering the important parts. And only the affluent could afford to commission a textile or buy a textile. And one example was, it was the price of a goat. And so maybe now we think, okay, goat isn't so expensive, but in the 1920s it was very expensive. But now it's different. You have threads, cheap threads widely available in the markets. So the coastal peoples weave textiles. And and the inland people buy them. They still wear traditional textiles, but they wear textiles of the coastal peoples.
Okay. Herbert Kennedy has two more questions. It says, what do you think underlies the taboo against inland people weaving? And the second part was, do people will their textiles to offspring, so other family members?
Okay, well, regarding the latter question, as I said earlier, many textiles go to the grave. If people will buy, like an individual have textiles, like sometimes they're given as gifts, like for marriage, for graduation, or different times. And also textiles are used as compensation. Okay, like, they're paid, for work, you're paid with a textile in the past. You also have textiles like, okay, within your family, you wronged a relative. And so, you kind of, you make up by giving them a textile. And also you have specific textiles that are for, for the coffin cover. And so these go into the grave. And so even with Mrs. Yanti, one of her relatives had a textile and had one of these patola locally woven Tanapi patola. And she didn't know until she went to the funeral of this relative. And it's because they're always kept and, kept. Yes.
And the first part, do you have any idea what underlies in the taboo against inland people weaving?
Yeah, it's not clear, and that's something we will, try to uncover, even though for me it's not so important. But you do have this in other parts of Indonesia and Sumba, for example. Like in central Sumba, weaving is also taboo because they see the island as a warp, and there's weaving in the center. If the warp breaks, it means the island will sink into the ocean. And also the same in Flores, you have, like with the Leo group, some groups inland they do not weave, but on the coast they weave. And also, okay, so so for Alor, for the Alarung, they kind of explain it, okay, with the coming of Islam, they also brought textile production, the knowledge of textile production, but then that doesn't explain the Christian groups. Where did they get the knowledge of textile production? It's still, I don't have the answer for the question. Yeah.
Okay, well, so thank you very much, Linda, for this most interesting and informative talk, and which may have inspired some of the listeners today to try and visit the Alor Regency.
I hope so, yes.
Okay, if there are any further questions, please send them to Dr. McIntosh via email, and I will spell it to you, but you'll also should see it on the screen. It's mcinbkk@gmail.com.
Yeah.
You see it on the screen.
Yeah, so for links to the earlier articles, you can go to academia.edu and look up Linda S. McIntosh, and you can find like the one article on Warpikad of Umapura. as well as, and also if you want links to the ebook or information about the forthcoming article, please, you're more than welcome to contact me.
Yeah, and remember that this is based on a book. So if you want to know more, go ahead and purchase this book. And really, congratulations. It's most fantastic, in addition to your other books and all your research work. And we
Again,
wish
this is, oh, sorry, this is just preliminary research, and also you couldn't do it without my collaborator, Mrs. Yulanti Pinney.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right.
Well, thank you very much again, and wishing you all the success in the future.
Okay, thank you so much, Kun Ruth. Take
Yeah.
care. Happy holidays.
Thank you. And for everyone, I'd like, behalf of the Science Society, we want to thank you for joining this lecture this afternoon. And you can follow, if you want to know more about future programs, you can look at the Science Society Facebook and YouTube. And good afternoon to all of you.
Thank you. Well,